Hello, welcome back. We're going to read chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And when we left off, Roz was being shown around the farm, and she learned that her whole world now will revolve around the dairy cows. Chapter 6, The Monster. It's interesting because the animals on the island thought of Roz as a monster, and now this chapter is called The Monster. The cows were munching hay in their stalls when the big barn door slid open and a mechanical monster stomped in from the rain. The creature marched down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing through the cavernous space until she found an empty corner, and there she stood in the shadows as a storm began to rage outside. Everybody listened as the rain poured and the wind howled and the thunder cracked. By midnight, the storm had blown over, and there was only a gentle sprinkling on the roof. But the herd couldn't rest with that monster lurking in the corner. Cows began quietly mooing to each other. What is the monster doing? She hasn't moved in hours. I bet she's waiting to eat us in her sleep. The cows gasped at this horrible thought, and then an old cow named Annabelle tried to calm down the herd. Relax, everyone, she said. There were monsters like this at my last farm, and they never ate any cows. Come to think of it, they never ate anything at all. If this monster has never eaten anything at all, then she must be awfully hungry by now, said a cow named Tess. I saw the farmer driving the monster around in his truck, said a calf named Lily. I don't think he would have done that if she were dangerous. Nobody knew quite what to think of the strange creature in their midst. I think the monster's harmless. I think the monster's unnatural. I think the monster's moving. The herd fell silent as the monster marched out from the shadows and into the middle of the barn. And then the monster did the impossible. She did the unthinkable. She spoke to the cows in the language of the animals. I am not a monster. I am a robot. My name is Roz. Chapter 7, The Robot Story. None of the cows could believe that this monster, this robot, this machine had just spoken to them in their animal language. They stared at her nervously, shifting in their stalls, wondering what she would do next. What Roz did next was simple. She told the truth. She stood in the middle of the barn and shared her story with the herd. I spent my first year of life on a remote wild island, Roz began to tell them. I did not know how I got there. I only knew that I wanted to survive. So I studied the island animals to see how they survived. And a surprising thing happened. Their sounds and movements started making sense to me. I was learning the language of the animals. Even when I could speak to them, the animals wanted nothing to do with me. But that changed when I discovered an orphaned gosling. The poor little thing would have died on his own, so I cared for him and I adopted him as my son. His name is Brightbill. A murmur spread through the herd. When the animals saw me caring for Brightbill, they finally accepted me. I was no longer alone. I had friends and a family and a home, and life was good. Until the Rico robots arrived. They came in their sleek white airship to take me away, and when I resisted, they became violent. All the animals on the island defended me. They fought bravely and destroyed all the Ricos. But I was badly damaged in the fighting. I needed repairs, and I could not get the repairs on the island. So the animals loaded my broken body into the airship, and it took me far away from my home. Lily the calf poked her head through the railing and said, Well, what about Brightbill? My son is smart and tough, and he has a good flock, said Roz. I think he will be okay without me. Well, where were you taken? Said Tess. I was taken back to the factory where I was made. The factory is run by a crew of robot workers called the Makers. When I arrived, they put me in a room filled with other broken robots. And some robots were completely ruined, and the Makers immediately sent them away. So here's a picture of Roz with Brightbill. And then here's a picture of the maker with Roz's body. But those of us with working computer brains, we were given a test. What kind of a test? Asked Lily the cow. The makers simply asked us questions. They asked us how we become damaged. They asked us how we would respond to different emergencies, and they asked us to identify certain sounds and smells and objects. So robots who answered every question correctly were repaired, and all the other robots were destroyed. In the wilderness, I camouflaged my body to survive. In the robot factory, I camouflaged my personality to survive. I pretended to be a perfectly normal robot. I did not say that I had adopted a goose, or that I could speak with animals, or that I had resisted the Ricos. I said what I had to say to pass their test. And it worked. Good for you, Roz, shouted Tess, and the other cows smiled. The makers shut me off, and when I awoke, my body was fixed, and I was on this farm. Now, like all of you, I belong to Mr. Sharif. The cows stopped smiling. Everyone was quiet. And then old Annabelle spoke up. Well, I was taken from my friends and family, too. They're back on the farm where I was born. I still think about them every day. It is difficult to be apart from our loved ones, said Roz. You know, Roz, things could be worse, said Tess. At least on this farm, you're still surrounded by nature. Yes, things could be worse. The robot's eyes brightened up a little. But I am not safe here. If any human ever learns who I really am, they will have me destroyed. And that is why, when the time is right, I will try to escape. Chapter 8, The Computer. Inside the barns, the lights were low and the sounds were hushed and the night slowly wore on. A few cows were chewing hay, but most were resting peacefully. Our robot had returned to her corner. The soft glow of the computer screen lit up her face as she studied farming. She learned all about the herd, the pasture and the fields, and about the native plants and wildlife. She learned about the seasons and the climate and the weather, and about machines and the buildings and the fences and the tools and all the dairy equipment. Every detail was perfectly remembered in the robot's computer brain. And in a single night, Roz became a farmer. Chapter 9, The First Day. At dawn, the cows began to stir one by one. They walked out the side door, crossed the muddy barnyard and into the parlor for a quick milking before heading down to the pasture. They followed the same routine every morning, just like clockwork. However, on this morning, the cows were joined by a robot. With her computer brain full of farming knowledge, Roz was ready for her first day on the job. She stomped through the tall, wet grass, and her head slowly turned as she scanned the scenery. The sun was rising, the fog was lifting, and the cows were grazing. And then the whole world seemed to flip upside down. Before Roz knew what was happening, she was on her back, looking up at the sky. And there was a strong stench that filled the air. Our robot had slipped on cow poop. The herd erupted into laughter, and Tess called out, "Welcome to Hilltop Farm, Roz," which then brought another round of snorts and moos. "You'll have to get used to those cow patties." And then there was laughter. Not much happens around here, so we're always eager to laugh, said old Annabelle. I understand, said Roz. I like laughing too. And she forced out an awkward, ha, ha, ha. Then the robot stood up, wiped her feet, and continued exploring the farm. But now she was more careful to watch where she stepped. The fields and the buildings and fences were all in need of Roz's attention, but her most urgent task was to fix the broken farm machines. The herding machine was designed to roll through a pasture and look after the cows while they grazed, but it had gotten stuck in the mud and was becoming a popular hangout for birds. The field machine was gigantic, like a house on wheels. It was designed to roam the fields, planting and fertilizing and harvesting the feed crops, but it had ground to a halt weeks ago and was now just collecting dust in a far corner of the property. The drone was a small flying machine with a special camera attached to its underside. It was designed to fly above the farm and keep an eye on the whole place, but it came crashing down when a mob of crows attacked it in flight. Other broken machines were hidden within the clumps of weeds, and still more were waiting for repairs in the shed. The peaceful morning was suddenly jolted by the sounds of power tools as Roz began fixing the machines. Thanks to her robotic strength and smarts, she made excellent progress. The hours flew by, and the machines rumbled back to life, and the farm began buzzing with activity. So here's Roz with her herd of cows. At sunset, Rambler came bouncing down the driveway with the Sharifs in the front, and Oscar the dog was in the back. "How's it going, Roz?" asked Mr. Sharif, leaning out the window. The children giggled and waved from their seats, and the dog sniffed the breeze. "It is going well," said Roz in her robotic voice. "Many of the machines are working again." "I see that." Mr. Sharif gazed up at the drone, circling high overhead. "We thought we'd come out and check on you, but it looks like you're doing fine. So we'll just stay out of your way. Keep up the good work, Roz." As the truck started rolling up the driveway, Oscar looked back at Roz and barked, "You smell like cow patties." Well, he was right. The robot was filthy, and she finished her first day as a farmer by scrubbing herself with soap and water. Chapter 10, The Routine. Reader, I don't want to bore you with every detail of our robot's farm routine. Many of her tasks were incredibly dull, and others were quite unpleasant. I'll just say that on any given day, Roz might have to be a mechanic or a veterinarian or a gardener or a plumber or a cleaner or a landscaper or a carpenter or an electrician or sometimes all of the above. Farm life kept Roz very busy indeed. Of course, she did have help. You already know about some of the machines, but the entire farm was equipped with technology that made life easier for everyone. Doors and gates opened automatically, and cows wore electronic collars that kept track of their health automatically. When a cow's udders were full, she simply had to stroll into the parlor where she'd be milked by gentle machines automatically. All that milk was piped into storage tanks, and it was cooled and bottled automatically. Once the milk truck was loaded up, it drove away and made its deliveries automatically. Mr. Sharif managed the business side of the farm. He dealt with customers and handled money and ordered supplies, and he did it all from the comfort of his home office. Now that he had a robot to do all the farm work, he hardly ever left his house. Roz was more content than she had ever expected to be. Most of her time was spent outdoors, with animals under the wide open sky. Even while laboring in the fields, she could always stop and smell the flowers, and look up at the clouds and feel the cool air drifting out the trees. And yet Roz was living two lives. When she had the farm to herself, she could play with the calves, or run through the grass, or chat with the wildlife. But whenever the Sharifs were near, Roz had to pretend to be a normal robot. She could never let them know who she really was. That's the end of chapter 10. See you soon.